They say true power doesn't announce itself. It moves in silence. It leaves no trace. And if it's done right, you'll never even know it was there. That's the essence of the B-2 Spirit, the most expensive and exclusive aircraft ever created. Built not to be seen, but to be feared. Even its shape is unsettling, a jet that doesn't look like a jet. No tail, no vertical stabilizers, just a black, bat-like wing gliding through the atmosphere like a phantom. When it first appeared in 1989, the world took notice. But not because it was loud, not because it was fast, and not because it dropped more bombs than anything before it. No, it stood out because it promised something chilling. You would never see it coming. At $2.13 billion per unit, it remains the most expensive aircraft ever made. To put that in perspective, you could buy an entire squadron of modern F-35 stealth fighters for the cost of a single B-2. You could fund the annual defense budget of a small country. And that price wasn't just for hardware. It covered decades of secret research, specialized hangars, climate-controlled coatings, and invisible technologies developed in the shadows. And the Pentagon made one thing absolutely clear. It is not for sale. Not to allies, not to NATO, not even to the closest strategic partners of the United States. Over the years, countries like Israel, Japan, and Australia quietly expressed interest. But the answer never changed. It wasn't about profit. It was about maintaining an edge, a strategic ghost that could reach any corner of the globe, strike with surgical precision, and vanish into the night sky. The logic was simple. Some weapons don't just project force. They change the rules of engagement. One Pentagon official summarized it best. He said, "There are things you share with friends, and then there are things you keep for yourself, because they change the balance of power." And the B-2? It was that kind of weapon. Only 21 units were ever built, and today just 19 remain operational. Each one is guarded like a nuclear crown jewel, parked in specialized hangars that control temperature and humidity to the decimal. Even the paint on the aircraft, that stealth skin, can be compromised by something as basic as moisture or dust. The stealth coating is so sensitive that entire teams of technicians are dedicated solely to inspecting, maintaining, and reapplying it. A minor crack, an unnoticed chip, could light up the aircraft on enemy radar like a bonfire. But that's the price of invisibility. Most aircraft are built to fly fast, climb high, or outmaneuver the enemy. But the B-2 wasn't built to be seen. Its entire design is a rejection of convention. No fuselage, no vertical tail, no traditional silhouette. Just a perfect flying wing. 52 meters wide, smoothly curved, almost alien in appearance. And beneath that elegant form, technology designed to confuse, scatter, and devour enemy signals. The airframe itself is sculpted to reflect radar away from its source, while the coating absorbs what little signal remains. The engines are hidden inside the wings, and their exhaust is vented in a way that cools the heat before it can be detected by infrared sensors. To enemy systems, it doesn't look like a bomber. It doesn't even look like a plane. It barely looks like anything at all. Despite its massive size, on radar, the B-2 appears no larger than a small bird. And yet, it carries the destructive weight of a flying fortress. It can deliver 16 nuclear bombs or 80 precision-guided JDAMs in one run. It can obliterate hardened bunkers or take out enemy command centers from the edge of space without ever crossing into contested airspace. And then there's its range. With over 11,000 kilometers of unrefueled range, the B-2 can fly from Missouri to the Middle East and back without touching foreign soil. Add aerial refueling, and the aircraft becomes a global ghost, capable of reaching any nation, any bunker, any capital, from the safety of American skies. As one strategist once put it, with the B-2, there is no such thing as out of reach. But stealth, real high-end stealth, is never cheap. Every hour the B-2 spends in the air costs an estimated $135,000. Not because of fuel or pilots, but because the systems that make it invisible are also incredibly fragile. For every hour of flight, the aircraft may need up to 6 hours of ground maintenance. That means the logistics behind every single mission, even a training run, are a massive, coordinated effort of specialists, engineers, and software technicians. The B-2 isn't just rare, it's sacred. It requires care, protection, and precision. They call it many names: the Ghost of the Sky, the Black Triangle, the Invisible Falcon. But those aren't just nicknames, they're warnings. Because the B-2 doesn't fight fair, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't even offer a chance to defend. It simply appears, executes its mission, and disappears again, long before the enemy ever knows what happened. And perhaps that's the most terrifying thing about it. Not that it's powerful, but that it's present, even when you can't see it. The B-2 didn't begin as a machine. It began as a question. How do you win a war without ever being seen? It was the late 1970s. The Cold War was no longer a standoff. It was an arms race spinning faster and darker than ever before. The Soviet Union had deployed the SA-5 and SA-10 air defense systems, radar networks that could see high-flying bombers from hundreds of kilometers away. Traditional American aircraft like the B-52 Stratofortress, once symbols of unchallenged dominance, were now vulnerable targets, visible on radar like neon signs in the sky. Washington understood what was coming. The age of the conventional bomber was ending, so the question became urgent. Could America build something so advanced, so unconventional, that it would be invisible to enemy eyes? In 1979, President Jimmy Carter gave the answer: yes. Behind closed doors, his administration authorized one of the most ambitious and classified defense projects in U.S. history, the Advanced Technology Bomber Program, or ATB. Its mission wasn't just to develop a new bomber, it was to redefine the very idea of flight, and to do it in total secrecy. The ATB was hidden under layers of compartmentalization. Even senior officials in Congress were unaware of its true scope. Engineers were moved to isolated facilities under black budget contracts. On paper, some of them were designing weather balloons. Others were allegedly working on radar calibration devices. In reality, they were designing a ghost. Two giants led the charge: Northrop and Boeing. They were fierce competitors, but they knew one thing: whoever cracked the stealth puzzle first would not just shape the future of air power, they would reshape warfare itself. Northrop had a radical idea, returned to a design that had failed decades earlier: the flying wing. In the 1940s, visionary engineer Jack Northrop had experimented with all-wing aircraft. The concept was sound: better lift, less drag, fewer surfaces to reflect radar. But at the time, computers weren't advanced enough to control such a platform. Pilots called it unmanageable. The military called it unstable. The project was shelved. Now, 30 years later, the flying wing was back. And this time, computers could do what human reflexes couldn't. At the heart of the design was something new: stealth geometry. Instead of sharp edges and hard angles, the aircraft would be built from blended curves, perfectly smooth contours, and shallow V-shapes that deflected radar away from its source. The engines would be buried within the wing, hidden from both radar and heat detection. Even the air intakes were designed with serrated edges to muffle the sound of incoming air, so it wouldn't whistle or echo. But that wasn't enough. It had to be invisible to the machines, too. That's where General Electric came in, developing highly shielded engine casings and low-emission exhaust systems. The jet's exhaust signature had to be cooled so thoroughly that surface-to-air missiles couldn't lock on with infrared sensors. Meanwhile, Hughes Aircraft and Raytheon worked on the bomber's radar and avionics systems, giving the aircraft what pilots would later describe as ghost vision. It could detect enemy positions, navigate terrain, and plan attack runs, all without emitting a signal of its own. Every piece of the aircraft was engineered for secrecy. Even the landing gear, when retracted, would be sealed behind radar-absorbing doors lined with specialized mesh. Every screw head and panel seam was recessed, aligned, and shielded. Nothing was left to chance. The construction itself was a kind of ritual. Only a handful of hangars in the world were allowed to assemble its parts. Each technician had security clearance beyond top secret. Most didn't even know what the aircraft looked like as a whole. They only worked on fragments, wings, panels, systems, sections. The full shape was only ever seen by a select few. And yet, the aircraft came together, slowly, quietly, like a myth taking shape in the dark. By the early 1980s, test models were flying under heavy cover at Groom Lake, what the world knows today as Area 51. No official photographs, no public statements, not even a name. It wasn't until 1988, nearly a decade after the project had begun, that the world saw a glimpse of what had been hiding. At a carefully staged event in Palmdale, California, the United States Air Force unveiled the new bomber to the press. It had no wings, no tail, no hard lines. Just a black, smooth, angular wing resting on its landing gear like a spacecraft from the future. It was designated the B-2 Spirit, a name chosen not for intimidation, but for mythology. Something ethereal, something whispered. A presence, not a profile. The press called it surreal. Foreign analysts called it science fiction. Soviet generals reportedly called it a strategic nightmare. And they weren't wrong. The B-2 wasn't just hard to see. It was nearly impossible to track. Early tests showed that Soviet radar networks couldn't lock onto the aircraft unless it flew directly overhead. And even then, only for a moment. It had no radar cross-section in the traditional sense. It didn't appear on infrared scans. It emitted no communication signals unless it chose to. And its black carbon composite skin absorbed over 90% of enemy radar waves. From its first public appearance, it was clear this wasn't just a plane. It was a revolution, decades ahead of its time. And it had been born in the shadows. For nearly a decade after its unveiling, the B-2 Spirit remained a mystery. It was paraded once at Palmdale, photographed from a distance, but never truly tested in war. That silence was intentional. In the eyes of Pentagon planners, the B-2 wasn't meant for casual deployment. It was designed for the nightmare scenario, a nuclear standoff, a first strike scenario, the kind of operation where failure would mean millions of lives. Its stealth was too rare, too expensive, too fragile to risk on conventional targets. But in 1999, all of that changed. The first mission didn't take place over Russia or China. It took place over Kosovo, in the skies above the Balkans, a region torn by ethnic violence, Serbian nationalism, and a collapsing post-Cold War order. NATO had launched an air campaign against Slobodan Milosevic's regime, hoping to cripple Serbian air defenses and force a retreat from Kosovo. It was called Operation Allied Force, and it became the proving ground for the B-2. In the opening hours of the campaign, 2 B-2 bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, flew across the Atlantic, and entered combat over Europe, without ever stopping to refuel and without ever being seen. Each bomber carried 16 JDAMs, precision-guided munitions that could strike within a few meters of a target. In total, over 22 missions were flown by B-2s during the Kosovo War. They dropped 680 tons of bombs and were responsible for destroying over 33% of all high-value Serbian targets, all without losing a single aircraft. Not one was ever intercepted. Not one was ever tracked. To Serbian radar, they simply didn't exist. What made the B-2 unique wasn't just its stealth, it was its ability to guide its own weapons in real time, even while cloaked. It could correct its bombing runs mid-flight, make minute course changes, and release payloads from altitudes over 15,000 meters, well outside the reach of most enemy weapons. From thousands of kilometers away, it could silence a radar dish, crater a runway, or flatten a command post, and then vanish back into the clouds. But that was just the beginning. In October 2001, just weeks after the 9/11 attacks, the United States began its campaign against al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan. It was a mission filled with logistical challenges. The country was landlocked, mountainous, and lacked any nearby U.S. bases for launching long-range bombers. So the B-2 was chosen. That month, a pair of B-2s took off from Missouri and flew nonstop to Afghanistan, dropping precision bombs on Taliban targets in Kandahar and Kabul. But they didn't stop there. After the bombing, the aircraft turned west, flew to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, where a second crew took over and then continued home. In total, they spent over 44 continuous hours in the air, a new world record for a bombing mission. During the operation, the aircraft neutralized dozens of Taliban strongholds, opening the door for U.S. ground forces and special operations teams to move in with reduced resistance. And yet, even then, the B-2 remained invisible. No Taliban radar, no visual confirmation, no defensive fire. It was as if the sky itself had turned against them. Then came 2003 and the start of the Iraq War. On the opening night of Operation Iraqi Freedom, B-2s again led the charge. From thousands of miles away, they struck key Iraqi air defense systems, early warning radars, and presidential command bunkers around Baghdad. Some reports suggested that Saddam Hussein's personal compounds were among the first targets, chosen specifically to decapitate the regime's leadership. American generals wanted to blind the enemy before they could even lift a finger. The B-2 made that possible. But the most haunting example of the Spirit's capabilities came much later, in 2011, during Operation Odyssey Dawn in Libya. At the height of the Arab Spring, Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi began launching attacks on rebel cities using tanks and aircraft. NATO intervened. And once again, the B-2 was called in to open the skies. This time, 3 B-2s flew nonstop from Missouri to Libya and back, striking key airfields, anti-aircraft batteries, and hardened shelters where Gaddafi's fighters were stationed. In one night, the Libyan Air Force was effectively neutralized before most of its planes even took off. Again, no American aircraft were hit, no B-2 was tracked, and Gaddafi's forces, reliant on Soviet-era radar, had no idea what had hit them. But the most secretive, and arguably the most daring, mission involving the B-2 remains classified to this day. Only fragments of it have leaked into public view. In 2024, following a sudden escalation between Iran and the West over nuclear developments, the Pentagon reportedly authorized a deep penetration strike known internally as Midnight Hammer. According to declassified summaries and satellite analysis, 7 B-2 bombers departed from the continental U.S. under complete radio silence. Each one carried multiple GBU-57A/B massive ordnance penetrators, bunker-busting bombs designed to destroy underground facilities protected by reinforced concrete and steel. The target was believed to be Fordo, a hardened nuclear enrichment facility buried deep beneath a mountain. Iranian defenses included low-frequency radar, electronic jamming, and long-range SAM batteries. It didn't matter. The B-2s dropped their payloads at high subsonic speeds from altitudes exceeding 10 kilometers and turned away before the first bombs even hit. No radar detected their entry. No missile was launched. No response was triggered until the explosions began. The official outcome remains classified, but satellite imagery in the following weeks showed collapsed tunnel entrances, melted structural supports, and a smoking crater where reinforced shelters once stood. No pilots were harmed, no aircraft was lost. And Iran, for all its warnings, could not prove the attack had even occurred. That's what makes the B-2 different. It doesn't conquer airspace, it skips past it. It doesn't warn enemies, it erases their options. And it doesn't fight for territory, it fights for time. The time to strike before war begins. The time to vanish before retaliation is possible. It is a ghost, not of death, but of dominance. A shadow that arrives without warning and leaves only silence behind. Stealth isn't just science, it's obsession. And when obsession drives engineering, the price is always measured in billions. The B-2 Spirit was never meant to be affordable. It was meant to be perfect, in ways no other aircraft had ever dared to be. Its final price tag, $2.13 billion per unit. But that's just the official figure. If you include development, logistics, infrastructure, software integration, climate-controlled hangars, and classified maintenance protocols, some analysts estimate the real cost at closer to $2.8 billion per plane. To understand why, you have to start at the beginning, with its research and development. The B-2 wasn't built off existing designs. It had no predecessors to borrow from. It was a leap into the unknown, a flying wing with zero tail surfaces, full stealth integration, radar-absorbing skin, and onboard navigation systems capable of mapping terrain without GPS. To achieve that, Northrop Grumman and its partners had to invent technologies from scratch. Stealth composites, advanced sensor fusion, heat-reducing exhaust paths, and radar-dampening geometry so precise that the curves of the aircraft were shaped using supercomputers, not human hands. Every line on the B-2 is calculated. Every screw is recessed. Even the paint isn't paint. It's a classified radar-absorbent polymer, applied in layers, each one sensitive to temperature, pressure, and humidity. And that's where the cost starts to spiral. Because stealth is not a one-time feature, it's a condition, and it requires constant care. The B-2 surface is so delicate that a light rain can compromise its radar profile. In some environments, the moisture alone can cause the stealth coating to swell or peel, creating microfractures that reflect radar. To prevent that, the B-2 can't simply park in a standard military hangar. It requires specialized climate-controlled facilities with exact temperature and humidity settings. Each one costs tens of millions to build and maintain, and only a handful exist worldwide. Inside these hangars, teams of technicians comb over the aircraft using laser scanning arrays, checking for imperfections invisible to the human eye. A misaligned panel, a cracked seal, or even a tiny bubble in the coating could compromise the aircraft's invisibility. Every hour the B-2 flies demands 5 to 7 hours of maintenance, not for repairs, for preservation. Its engines, 4 General Electric F-118s, are custom shielded to reduce heat emissions. Their exhaust ducts are flattened and curved to prevent thermal detection. That means they run hotter, wear faster, and require constant inspection. Any error in calibration could light up the aircraft like a candle in infrared. And then there's the cost of operation. On average, the B-2 costs $135,000 per flight hour. That includes fuel, maintenance, mission planning, stealth upkeep, and onboard systems management. By comparison, an F-16 costs around $22,000 per hour. Even the F-35, another stealth platform, operates at about $36,000 per hour. And there's more. Because you can't just hire a pilot to fly the B-2, you have to train one from scratch, and the bar is unimaginably high. Out of the tens of thousands of U.S. Air Force pilots in history, fewer than 500 have ever been qualified to fly the B-2. The training takes over a year, includes both simulators and live missions, and involves not just flight, but nuclear protocol certification, advanced stealth mission planning, and secure communications management. Pilots must be cleared not just for top-secret operations, but for special access programs, the highest level of security clearance in the U.S. military. They operate in pairs, a pilot and a mission commander. Both must be trained to handle stealth failures, mission reroutes, long-duration flights exceeding 30 hours, and nuclear command and control scenarios. And when they're not flying, they're studying. Stealth isn't passive. Pilots must constantly monitor enemy radar developments, new detection technologies, and global defense trends. Because one innovation in enemy radar could render years of training obsolete. And yet, the Air Force keeps funding it, maintains it, upgrades it. Why? Because no other aircraft can do what the B-2 does. It's the only bomber in history that can fly halfway around the world without being refueled, penetrate the densest air defense networks on Earth, strike multiple targets with precision bombs or nuclear weapons, and vanish before the enemy knows it was there. It is, as some defense officials have said, a strategic first-strike weapon, not designed for attrition warfare, but for decapitation, for scenarios where one mission might prevent a war or win it before it begins. So why is it so expensive? Because it has to be. Because being invisible in the 21st century, truly invisible, costs more than materials, labor, and fuel. It costs control, precision, secrecy, and the unrelenting maintenance of perfection. And that's the paradox of the B-2. To make a ghost, you have to work harder than anyone else in the world to keep it from fading away. The B-2 spirit is often called invincible, a perfect weapon of stealth and power, but even ghosts can be caught in the light. The truth is, no technology, no matter how advanced, is without vulnerabilities. For decades, the B-2's stealth was thought nearly absolute, but military intelligence began to uncover unsettling facts. The bomber's stealth was designed primarily against high-frequency radar systems. Modern low-frequency radars, the kind used by some Russian and Chinese defense networks, could still pick up the aircraft. They couldn't track it precisely or target it effectively, but the B-2 was not completely invisible. This opened a dangerous door. What if the enemy developed radar that could spot the ghost before it struck? It wasn't just theory. Nature itself posed a threat. The B-2's radar-absorbent coatings are sensitive to rain, humidity, and even dust. Even a single drop of water can increase its radar cross-section by up to 30%. That means in wet or stormy weather, the B-2 could become much more visible, a nightmare for stealth operations. But perhaps the most humbling reminders of the B-2's fragility came not from enemies, but from accidents. On February 23, 2008, one of the most dramatic events in B-2 history shook the military and the world. The Spirit of Kansas, one of the few B-2s based at Whiteman Air Force Base, was preparing for a routine training flight. During takeoff, a catastrophic failure occurred. The aircraft lost lift, skidded off the runway, and caught fire. The pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Burr, was forced to eject at low altitude. Miraculously, he survived with minor injuries. But the bomber was destroyed at an estimated cost of $1.4 billion. The crash investigation revealed a tragic flaw, a sudden stall caused by a mix of technical malfunction and pilot error. This incident was the first and only B-2 loss in its history, underscoring how even the most advanced aircraft can be undone by human and mechanical vulnerabilities. And it wasn't the last. In 2022, another B-2 was retired early after a fire broke out in its hangar. The cause? Classified? The cost? Estimated in the hundreds of millions. It was a stark reminder that the $2 billion aircraft is still a machine, vulnerable to the same risks as any other. Its value, ironically, makes every accident a potential national tragedy. Even stealth technology itself is a double-edged sword. Because the B-2 relies on a complex web of sensors, computers, and coatings, it is sensitive to errors and environmental conditions. Humidity, rain, dust, even temperature fluctuations can degrade its stealth, and every maintenance error can increase the risk of detection. Yet beyond the physical risks, the B-2 faces another invisible enemy: time. The aircraft is aging. Many of its components are no longer manufactured. Replacement parts must be specially crafted. Maintaining operational readiness demands more resources every year. The United States Air Force has had to extend service lives, retrofit avionics, and continuously upgrade software just to keep the fleet mission ready. So while the B-2 remains a symbol of technological supremacy, it is also a reminder of the limits of even the most ambitious engineering. No matter how advanced, no matter how expensive, no machine is invincible. The ghost of the sky can be seen, it can be broken, and it can fail. But in those moments of vulnerability, the B-2's true legacy shines brightest, a testament to human ingenuity, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of invisibility in an ever-visible world. Today, the B-2 spirit remains one of the most guarded secrets of modern warfare. From its original 21 bombers, only 19 remain in service, each one a flying fortress, a reminder of a bygone era of Cold War brinkmanship and technological triumph. The United States Air Force plans to retire the B-2 by 2032 after more than 4 decades of service. But the spirit of the ghost of the sky will not fade into silence. Its successor, the B-21 Raider, is already taking shape, a new generation of stealth bomber designed to operate in an even more contested and technologically advanced battlefield. Where the B-2 was born in secrecy and Cold War tension, the B-21 must face new threats: advanced integrated air defenses, hypersonic missiles, electronic warfare, and cyber attacks. The Raider promises to be faster, more versatile, and equipped with cutting-edge sensors that can adapt on the fly. But it owes everything to the path the B-2 carved. The B-2 wasn't just a plane. It was a warning, a shadow moving through the air, telling the world, "We can reach you anywhere." That message shaped decades of strategy, deterrence, and conflict, the silent backbone of American power. And as the B-2 nears its final descent, its legacy lives on, not just in steel and stealth coatings, but in the very idea of invisible power. Because in a world where every corner is watched, every signal is traced, and every move is tracked, the true advantage belongs to those who can vanish. The B-2 spirit was that advantage, a ghost that whispers to friend and foe alike, "We are here, even when you can't see us." Thank you for watching this deep dive into the incredible story of the B-2 spirit, the ghost of the sky. If you found this video fascinating, make sure to subscribe for more powerful documentaries on history, technology, and global power. Don't forget to share this video with friends who love history and military technology, and leave your thoughts or questions in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this untouchable machine. Until next time, remember, some ghosts don't disappear. They just wait, silently above us.